Welcome to the 6th Virtual Bath Life Business Club, an event special featuring yet more tales from the lockdown. I'm Greg from Media Clash and I hope this finds you well. Today was actually due to be the Bath Life Summer Party at the Royal Crescent. So it goes, another event which isn't happening. Maybe that's a weird piece of timing, but there we are. We would otherwise be out tonight in the gorgeous Royal Crescent, and we're not going to do that, but we will be returning, of course, some stage. So week 11 in the Great Pause, and there are glimpses of some hibernating businesses coming back to life. Some dentists and health professionals are back from today. General retail can start from next Monday, and please look forward to Bath Life's Our Doors Are Open campaign, where we are seeking to highlight and promote our retailers who are starting trading once more. Also look out for a good way to promote your general opening up news and so on. And then by the end of this week, we'll know the government's guidance on hospitality, which is obviously vital for all our cities, but especially Bath. 2 key questions: will social distancing be relaxed from 2 to 1 meters? And if so, is now the time? Good luck to all, as we all find our way of navigating these strange times and coming back to life as we can. And of course, many businesses haven't paused. Professional services, for example, have largely continued. And we've had a number of excellent Bath Life business surgeries with Mojus Druitt, Univigil, and several others lined up. If you have a professional service which would help others, financial planning, digital marketing, recruitment, legal services, office fit out, whichever, please do talk to us. But for all the rekindling, all the promising early signs or desires to get back or plan for return to work and so on, there is one sector which has been abruptly stopped with no obvious timescale for return: events. And yes, that is just a tad close to home for us as a business. We'll be talking today with key players in all forms of events: Bath Festivals, Bath Half, the Theatre Royal Bath, and charity event fundraising at Dorothy House. Before then, a couple of updates. If you trade in or just plain interested in Bristol, Cardiff and Exeter, please look out for our similar business clubs. There's actually one at midday today in Bristol. They'll all be linked on a pinned Media Clash tweet and on LinkedIn as well. Talking of Cardiff, we're running the Delayed from March Cardiff Life Awards online July 9th. Free, obviously, uber glam, absolutely, inevitably. Our next session in Bath, our business club, will be a tourism special, which will feature the Royal Crescent Hotel and Spa, the Holborn Museum, and for the bigger picture, the economic picture, Visit Bath. On June 25th, which is next, I lose track of days, June 25th, whenever June 25th is, there'll be a Bath Life business surgery on dispute resolution and distressed assets with Mojus Druitt once more. Last week, we also had a lovely virtual wine tasting event with Stony Street, which raised about 600 quid or so for the Bath Bull, and we'll do another shortly. And next week, we expect to be making an announcement about the Bath Bull. On to today. Our speakers at this event special are Andrew Taylor from Bath Half. You'll recall it went ahead just before lockdown. Ian Stockley, Bath Festivals. Nicky Palmer, Theatre Royal Bath. And James Byron for Dorothy House. I'll ask each a few questions and then we'll bring them all in to take some questions from you too. Please see the little Q&A button at the bottom and I'll try and get through as many as I can. Let's begin, if we may, with Ian Stockley from Bath Festivals. Ian, if I could ask you to come to the virtual stage, as it were. Morning, Ian.
Good morning, Greg.
How are you doing?
All right. Week 11, did you say it was? Strange world that we are in.
It may be 12. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter.
We lose count of days, let alone weeks. Yes.
It keeps extending. So tell us this: what's happening with Bath Festivals? Much has been postponed. Some have indeed been entirely lost. Where are you up to?
Yes, well, the whole lockdown came at a very difficult stage for us. It was, I think, 3 weeks into tickets having gone on sale for the May festival. And I think we went into lockdown feeling this was going to be short-lived. We could postpone some to the autumn, potentially move some into May 2021. And therefore, we started quite positive. But the real challenge now is knowing exactly how we will come back, when we will come back, and what will our offer be. And so it has changed as we've gone through. We started, gosh, can we survive? We're still not out of the woods there from a cash flow point of view, but it's now the real focus is on how do we sort of make an opportunity out of this challenge and how do we come back stronger.
Okay, and well, fill us in with some thoughts in that direction. I mean, how will you attempt to come back stronger, or at least what is going to be different when you do come back?
Well, we've still got the Children's Literature Festival, which we're going to make an announcement on this week, and that currently is still fully programmed and ready to go on sale, but that would be the first week in October. And then we moved a lot of the events, the literature events, from May into a long weekend in November. So we have about 45 literature events scheduled in November. But as we've gone through...
Ian, can I ask you, those events which are scheduled, they are physical events, presumably?
Currently, yes, they're physical.
And what level of confidence do you have that even October, perhaps even November, will happen physically?
Not a high level of confidence, if I'm totally honest, and I don't believe we will come back with that offer when we get, but we have to make that decision by the end of June. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes around virtual alternatives to both the Children's Literature Festival and November literature events. And we're working really with very much a blended offer, I think, because even if the government guidelines say it's safe to come back in and we work with venues to be socially distanced and we only go to a certain percentage of full capacity and, you know, we go with all the hygiene rules, etc. Or we have an app out there that allows it, or whatever it is, I still think there will be a large number, particularly of our older age profile, who choose not to come. And so I think what we will have is hopefully a blended offer where you will go to a live event, depending on your attitude to risk, but we will also be working with partners to actually stream as well.
Could I just explore one specific detail there, which is a challenge which anyone in the event space faces?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be able to charge for virtual events?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how increasingly we are seeing a charging model coming up within a virtual world. But the other aspect, I think, if we come back with a dual offer of virtual stroke physical, if people choose to actually stay in their home and have it streamed virtually, I think there is more of an argument for a commercial charge. But again, we're looking through all of those options at the moment. But I think there is an increasing possibility that we will move to a partially charged virtual experience, yeah.
Okay, tell us about the finances. You've got a fundraiser out at the moment. Last time I checked, you were just through £7,000 or so of an expected 50k target. A couple of things. Is the 50k for a specific reason, or is it just a good old round number? And what happens to you as an organisation if it isn't reached? Okay.
50k is coming from a number of sources. So although it's on the crowdfund as a target, we've had an awful lot of donations from people who have decided not to take a refund for tickets that they'd already bought, and so have donated through that way. We've had other forms of donation and fundraising through quizzes that we've been running on a fortnightly basis, and then the Bird and Homewood Park are being extraordinarily supportive, and they are donating a proportion of what they get through the sort of Sunday lunches and cream teas they're putting on. So there are multiple ways, and then on top of that, we've had individual donations coming through. So the support has been hugely reassuring and gratifying, and I'm pretty certain we will get to that 50,000, and I feel very confident we will come through this, but we need all the support we possibly can get. And the actual harder aspect has been we were starting to move much more into corporate funding. We're sort of halfway through a transition, moving from two separate festivals that we used to have in March and May to one combined festival that absolutely connects the wider community. And the first 3 years of that transition has been hugely supported by philanthropic giving. And we're just moving to that stage where the corporates are seeing the momentum growing and putting their support behind us. And that's actually been a challenge just as we were moving into that form of funding. But overall, we're moving in the right direction, and I remain confident that we will come through this, even though as an arts organisation reserves are extraordinarily low.
Thank you. Tell us about the team. Roughly what size, and how have you been working in this time? Any furloughed?
We have, absolutely. We've got to take as much value from the job retention scheme of the government as possible. So actually, from this Thursday, we will only be 2 on the staff still. So we've furloughed all except 2. We've done it on a sort of needs basis. So in the April period, we were busy programming, so all our programs were working flat out. May, we've been marketing and developing development funding. We can go into this next period, and again, to be able to make use of the flexibility of bringing workers back part-time from July onwards, with the more recent change to the furlough scheme, we've put as many people as possible on furlough, and then envisage bringing them back on a part-time basis as their area of the festival requirement starts to be needed again. So that's the plan. We'll bring them back. So by October, remaining positive, we believe that we will be fully back up and running, and planning for May 21 full-time too.
And just lastly, how about for you personally? How has lockdown been? You perhaps not, you haven't been able to experience culture in the same way. You've not been able to eat out, socialise, and so on. Have you?
No, it's challenging. It's a real roller coaster, and you sort of feel you go one day forward, 2 days back, and it's this. But I think the huge challenge of all, and the thing that is just the uncertainty of the whole pandemic, the fact that we're planning for an option, but at the moment we have 4 different options in the next 6 months of the year, depending on which way the pandemic goes. And that uncertainty is the biggest challenge, and that's what sort of affects me emotionally, I think, too. It's just so hard. But we'll get there, and I do believe we can come back stronger. There's some tremendous new partnerships growing, and I think that whole aspect of collaboration and partnership and working together is really growing in momentum through this crisis, and that's a real rewarding side of it.
We'll pick up some of the collaboration points when we have the panel session together, and thank you for opening up like that at the end, because give or take, everyone is experiencing that. They may not vocalise in quite the same way. It is a very pressured time, but we all have to keep staring forward and try and work out how we're going to get to
keep positive. Keep positive. Yeah, keep positive. Absolutely.
Seize the positives. Good, Ian. Thank you. If I could bring in Nicky Palmer now from the Theatre Royal Bath. Good morning, Nicky.
Morning, Greg.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Good. I mean, if you look at it from a sort of macro point of view, Theatre Royal Bath must have been amongst the most severely affected of all larger scale activities in Bath. Talk us through what it meant for shows being cancelled, the loss of revenue for the team, that period in March to the end of March when you're making those big decisions as a management team.
So we shut on the 16th of March, literally as an audience was arriving to see, I think it was Band of Gold on that week. So we had Band of Gold on in Bath. We also had just opened Blithe Spirit with Jennifer Saunders, which of course everyone, or a lot of people would have seen in Bath last summer 2019. And that had just been out on tour, and it had just opened in the West End of the Duke of York's Theatre. Prior to the 16th of March, interestingly, we'd just seen ticket sales dropping off. So the advanced ticket sales weren't quite at the daily level that we'd have expected. So we were definitely aware that there was a sense of nervousness from the public about perhaps going to places with a lot of people indoors. And then, as I say, on the 16th of March, all of a sudden, all theatres shut. We were actually just about to start a board meeting. So it was a very, very short board meeting because we were literally straight out and just trying to work out what to do. And from then on, it was, I think, as Ian said, it was the uncertainty. There wasn't a lot of guidance around in that first week, and we were just having to work out what to do. So it was a sort of a day-to-day problem that we were managing. Then we found out that obviously we were definitely going to be shut for a little while. So it was just a case of just going through sensibly, working with the producers, shutting their shows, notifying patrons, giving them the opportunity to have a refund, a credit, donate their tickets. and it's just been ongoing since then.
And just to amplify one point you mentioned at the beginning there, for those who are perhaps less familiar, many will think, of course, as the Theatre Royal Bath as the theatre that it is, but it's also what's called a producing theatre. So it creates shows which then tour the provinces, go into the West End. And that's your sort of commercial arm in a sense. So how does that work in terms of the overall finances of the enterprise if you simply don't have the profits from those shows for however long?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's that is the commercial, a massive commercial side of our business. We're fortunate that we have, in fact, all theatres, or the majority of theatres over the past few years have enjoyed quite a strong period. A lot of people have been going to the theatre, so that's been good. So we have been able to build up cash reserves. So it's okay for us for a certain period of time. But the longer the closure goes on, the harder it is. And I think as most organisations are doing, it's just a case of careful cash flow management, cost saving measures where possible. But all you can do, I think as Ian said, all you can do is stay positive, plan for 1,001 different scenarios with regards to reopening, because none of us know what they're going to be or when it's going to be. And you just got to keep going.
I think this may be a slightly technical point, but one of the other reasons why theatres have done well, particularly at Theatre Royal Bath, is the Theatre Tax Relief Scheme, which enables production costs to be offset against tax. How might that work if the productions are now not being mounted, or has that not been addressed just yet?
It was something I think Sam Mendes said when I think he did an article in the Financial Times, and then he was on the Andrew Marr show at the weekend. And it's something that I think has come from, not from Sam, but from our governing body, which is the Society of London Theatre and UK Theatre. And one of the things they've suggested is the Theatre Tax Relief Scheme, which is very similar to what was offered, I think, for the film industry or the gaming industry. And it's a massive earner or an income stream for producing. And I think at the moment it's something like 20 or 25% of tax that can be claimed back on pre-production costs. And they're saying that perhaps for a few years, perhaps that should go up to 50%, which would just help. It just helps us as we're producing plays just to get a little bit more of that money back. But yeah, as well as ticket sales that we're not getting and ticket income that we're not getting, there's no opportunity to get that tax relief because we can't produce plays. Just
again, for context, Sam Mendes in that FT piece, here's a context which perhaps we may not necessarily know, that the theatre as a sector played to 34 million people, which is actually pretty much the same as the Premiership and Championship football attendances for the whole season. This is a scale sector. It's not just an artsy thing on stage, or however people who aren't involved may think of it. Generated ticket sales of 1.28 billion and contributed 32 billion to the UK economy, which is up about 22%. It's a vital area economically. Do you think you are going to get the support that the sector warrants from government, not just the Theatre Royal?
I'd like to think so. Our SALT UK Theatre are working very closely with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and we've been given the opportunity, you always get the opportunity to feed in thoughts. If something comes back to us, you get the opportunity to feed back on it. And I'd like to think that the support will be there, whether or not if the furlough scheme is extended, if we have to close for longer, if it's the theatre tax relief. I'd like to think there will be some support there because it is a massive, massive, massive boost to the UK economy.
And Theatre Royal Bath is a massive, massive, massive boost to the Bath economy as well. It's vital for us all that it emerges. As a point of reassurance, Theatre Royal Bath has considerable reserves such that it can see out at least some of the short to near term travails it faces. But that's not true in other theatres. So Leicester and Southampton have both closed, I think others as well. What does that do to the ecology of the theatre world when it comes to thinking about being able to produce plays through the provinces subsequently, if they've closed?
It's tough. I mean, there's no point in one theatre being an outlier and thinking, well, actually, we're okay. We've survived. We'll reopen, because we're part of a regional theatre ecology. So we're all linked in. So if no other regional or if other regional theatres aren't open for whatever reason, then producers aren't necessarily going to want to spend a few £100,000 on producing a play, because they can't just go to one venue and earn their money back. They have to know that they've got 6, 7, 8 weeks of touring venues available to them. And that's the same with Bath, Theatre Royal Bath. As a producer, we can't produce something and expect to just put it on in Bath. We won't make our money back. We've got to be able to go to 6, 7, 8 plus other regional venues to get the money back, to make it worthwhile producing.
So there is a sort of latency problem here, that down the line there is an issue which in some way is or will have to be addressed. I want to come to a more immediate thought, which is, Ian mentioned about maybe some combo of virtual and actual. Clearly there have been some material attempts at online theatre productions, most notably the National Theatre. But I'll give you a point. That theatre is of its nature evanescent, interactive. It lasts for 2 hours. The audience feeds off the actors and the other way around. Zoe Wanamaker said at the weekend, when theatre is filmed, it becomes intangible. You can't feel it. You can't smell it. You can't breathe it. It does not have the same effect on your body. Does theatre online work? Or is that part of your short-term salvation?
It's not part of our short-term salvation for Theatre Royal Bath. If you look at NT Live, National Theatre Live, the reason why they're filmed is because those plays they're successful in their own right to start with. And so they then spend a lot of money on having them filmed very, very well. And it gives people the opportunity to go and see them that perhaps wouldn't have been able to get to London. But you then ask yourself that actually, if that becomes the norm for someone like National Theatre, it also stops the National Theatre having to tour. So you look at it from that point of view. I mean, it's true, there's nothing better than sitting in an auditorium with however many other people and collectively watching something on stage. And it's just when you hear a sudden gasp and you just think, it's the most incredible feeling, whether that's theatre, whether it's enjoying a concert live, a gig live. It's the whole idea about theatre is about social proximity, both with other audience members and indeed with actors on stage. So do I think that, I don't think digital and filming theatre is the way forward. I mean, you may as well, I think it was Alan Ayckbourn said, you may as well watch TV, that's what TV is.
All right, come to this social proximity point. The main house is something like 880 seats or some such. On current estimates, what would be the maximum if you wish to, and if you had the shows to put on, what's the maximum you could put in that main house, roughly? What, you mean if the social distancing measures as they stand at the moment? I think we've worked out it'd probably be about 20% would be the maximum number of tickets we could sell. So about 150, 160, something like that. And you can't work commercially at that level. It cannot make sense unless you're charging £300 a ticket or something. Exactly, yeah, no, it can't. And I think that's why we're waiting for all the information to come out at the moment, which I think is imminent to us, like draft guidelines about what measures may be in place. A lot of it we can do because we've got so many different exits and entrances, so we can work out one-way systems and one-way systems through the bars and things like that. But it is going to be about sitting near to other people. But then, I don't know, you look at South Korea and they've just reopened, I think it's Phantom, as normal with full auditorium, etc., etc. So I think there's going to be a lot of measures in place. Do you have face masks? Do you ask, is it a condition of coming to the auditorium that you have to wear a face mask, a bit like on public transport? I don't know, the devil's going to be in the detail, and we've just got to wait for that all to come out. Yeah. Thank you, Nicky. And we'll come back to the more general point about social proximity and sitting next to strangers in odd places in 3, 6, 9 months' time or so. So Nicky, for now, thank you. Let's bring in James from Dorothy House. As mentioned in the intro, we're keen to explore all different areas of events, and events are a key part of Dorothy House's fundraising. So James, straight in, How has the pandemic affected your fundraising? What have you not been able to do?
Well, I mean, straight away, we've not been able to run a big breakfast 5K run. We had an open day planned and we weren't able to bring people into our building. That certainly would have been profoundly unsensible when we're delivering care from there, even if it had been allowed. So, you know, it's affected both those kind of direct participation events for us and those events that bring our community closer to us and are part of our cultivation of wider support. So, you know, it's been really quite profound.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right in my view to frame it that it's, of course, the money matters, but it's the social interaction and the connectivity that your sorts of events, all sorts of events, can bring. But tell us in broad shape, perhaps, if not detail, how does the reality as you see it, and I'm thinking more commercially here in terms of fundraising, how does that now compare with your original plan?
So I think it's really intensified some of the discussions that we've been having, that nationally sponsorship as a form of donations has been declining for charities for a few years now. And we've been witnessing that as well. And so you look at the profound shifts that just happened and start asking yourself, well, you know, are we going to be able to kind of market our way to overcome a declining market now? Or do we need to think kind of more profoundly about that? But I think, as you say, that connection that events give you to your community, the chance to do something, in many cases, in memory of a loved one, is a very, very profound thing. So for us, that financial element is always in balance with the other parts of the connection that events give us. And so we're utterly committed to finding a way to do that. But I think it's changed the answer away from being, can we do the same thing but find a way to do it better, to having to ask ourselves, well, okay, what is the next version of that looks, you know, like a different model, perhaps? You know, we've already heard mention of that hybrid model of events where there's a virtual component and a physical component available. And we've, you know, started talking about that for things like our Hospice Care Hero Walk on the 12th of September. Might it be possible to do some element of that physically? Well, if you're talking about a walk, you can probably socially distance a walk, but actually that event is an experience with a party afterwards. And if half of the people aren't there for the party afterwards and you need to keep people away from each other, it's probably going to be difficult to do a financially viable proposition there that gives a genuinely good experience in the way you can if you've got that critical mass of people. So I think that's the real tension there in trying to scope out those new models on a viable basis.
That said, for Ian with the festivals, Nicky with the theatre, for you with your events, and we'll come on to Andrew, people are very forgiving at the moment. We all know how incredibly tough it is and how impossible it is to put on physical events. Are you finding that there is a broad acceptance and a continuing support amongst those who donate or contribute in whichever way to events?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've been really humbled by the support from our community as a whole, whether that's been giving us face masks or giving us money in terms of cash appeals, and, you know, and people's flexibility in some cases. So, you know, spring would be a time where traditionally we'd have lots of open gardens going on as self-organised events across our community. Almost none of those have been able to happen. We looked at, can we live stream from people's gardens, and just felt that wasn't going to be the same experience and be something that was kind of, you know, obviously we're here to make money to support hospice care, something that was going to do that. But what we have had is people doing plant sales from their front gardens in an appropriate socially distanced way, who are people who'd normally open their gardens to the public, you know, and in some cases raising more than £1,000 by doing that. So, you know, that's been incredible, the way, you know, some individuals in our community have responded and really flexed how they might have used an event and doing something different for us. And that is what keeps us here, keeps us delivering care. So that's great to be received.
So this touches into a point that Ian raised about staying positive. I'd just like to open it out to a yet broader point. For all the problems, is there potentially a helpful side to the pandemic, that we're now all more aware of each other, perhaps all aware of our own mortality, our needs, which may actually help in terms of awareness going forwards when it comes to charities as well as more broadly care providers?
I mean, we hope so. You know, certainly for Dorothy House, our vision is a society where death is part of life, and actually that feels closer. And the reason why we want that is that we want everyone to live well and cherish every moment that they have in life, because that's vital. And so I think there is potentially an opportunity there of people thinking differently, but what we need to see is how much of this actually remains with us as we come out of this period, and how much we kind of slip into a new normal that might be profoundly different. We might be in supermarkets in masks for years, but might be no different at all in terms of some of the other ways we live our lives. But yeah, it does feel like there's a real opportunity there, and there's an opportunity for businesses to support in different ways. We've been asking people to donate their smiles and cash alongside that, and then the next bit of that will be a Bake Me Smile initiative that Richard Burtonette of the Burtonette Bakery is involved in and lending his support to. So there are real opportunities to do things differently that are positive for our community as a whole, and for businesses to support us in doing that. So definitely.
You very adeptly segged into what it was going to be my last question, but just to amplify it, of all the businesses, business owners on this call, what can they do to help you specifically, Dorothy House, and slightly more generally, other Bath charities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's clearly two things. There's been a sense of everyone being in this crisis together, and we'd love to see that remaining. And so, if you have a service, if you have something tangible that you can offer to charities, Dorothy House and charities across the city are in a position to benefit from that, perhaps more than before, because we've been forced to work more agilely. So actually we're more flexible and more able to adapt and work in different ways with potential partners. So there's that element that is hugely beneficial, but also in thinking about, if a virtual event's going on, could you sponsor that in the way that you might have done a physical event, and then make that viable for us, allow that to continue happening, because that would be hugely gratefully received by us and others as well.
Well, just to make the pitch in outline form to all forms of sponsors on this call, we're all going to have to adapt. If you have a need for a route to market to promote your services, if physical events don't exist, virtual ones will, and they have validity. So please continue to support, because it's that lifeline which will enable physical events to come back subsequently and deliver more benefit to you. So peroration over. James, thank you very much. Let's bring in Andrew. Andrew, I'd like to take you back, if I may, to a very intense time for you as an individual, which was your decision-making process on the Bath half in early to mid-March. Went ahead on March 15th, but it must have been a very nuanced decision between balancing the need or desire to raise money for charity, the duty of care for all concerned, and the personal. You'd invested a lot of time and energy, of course, into this endeavour. Talk us through that process for you personally at that time.
I think with public events, people probably don't realise that you go through various stages of decision-making process, and with an event such as ours that is a live event on the public highway, operational decisions around safety are being made right up and during the event itself. So we were engaged in a process of review as the pandemic started to unravel. We were involved in a number of meetings and discussions around it. The event was actually signed off by the council in February, second week in February at the Safety Advisory Group meeting, but we had a subsequent meeting with council officers and with public health team, and discussions with them that went right on up to the actual, literally the Friday evening before the event itself. And that advice remained consistent throughout, that there was no medical reason why we should not proceed with the event. So that was really where we were facing. It takes us about a week to build our event. So obviously we made a decision before we started the build. And when we got to Friday and everything was built, we were ready to go. We then had further decisions to be made. We were kind of caught in the eye of a perfect storm. So it was really on that Friday that everything started to unravel. So we had a significant amount of press criticism and social media anxiety expressed in social media around a view that the event should not go ahead and that the government advice or the public health advice was wrong. Everyone is an expert on COVID now, but we take our advice from the officials at local level in the clinical commissioning group and in Public Health England through the council, and that remained consistent. So we basically had to make a very difficult decision, and I fully respect and understand people's anxiety around this. It's a very emotive issue, but we also had to consider our responsibility, as you say, towards our runners and towards our charities, and towards runners that are already travelling to the event on the Friday, to whether we go ahead. So we had an experience in 2018 where we had to cancel because we weren't able to build the venue and our contractors were not able to arrive, and the public services couldn't be at the event. And then when we cancelled midweek in good time, people still turned up to run on the day. So we had a pretty good likelihood that several thousand people would turn up on the day to run an event where all the services and support were in place, but if we cancelled, we would basically have to turn our back on those runners and let them run down the road with traffic and without any medical support. And so the general view was that that was not a responsible thing to do, and that we would have to try and weather the storm in terms of that criticism and go ahead. And that's basically what we did. So we ended up with 60% of our runners turned up on the day. Charities, the charity fundraising has held up very well this year. So from that point of view, and it was a totally safe event in terms of there were no transfers to hospital or anything like that. So we did what we had to do in a very difficult situation.
And Andrew, how was that for you personally? You and Mel, your wife, so closely all over this, for obsessing about it as an event, and the eye of the storm, as you say, having to make that decision. What was that daytime Friday, daytime Saturday like for you personally?
It's almost impossible to describe, to be honest. I've been working in public events for 20 years. I've been involved in some very difficult situations, both on our own event and other people's. I was working on the London Marathon the weekend after the Boston bombings. I've been at events where people have died in front of me in the Finnish area in successive years, and but nothing. Okay, those kind of situations help prepare, but from a personal point of view, it was very, very difficult. And I think that certainly from my wife's point of view, that sort of level, I think some of the abuse that we got and the threats that we received from family, to our family and to staff members, that escalates it to another level altogether. But just setting aside that, in terms of the operational decision, we work with a network of other event organisers, and I have to say I'm very grateful for the support of some of those. So the larger road races in the UK, we're in regular contact with those guys, Chief Exec of the London Marathon, Operations Director at the Great Run organisation, people like that. We have a very close relationship with them, and they were very helpful in just guiding us through what was an impossible situation. It really was.
Let's move forward. I will make one observation. Correlation doesn't imply causation and so on, but in retrospect, whilst it was said at the time that this might cause a spike in the Bath area of coronavirus, given the way that coronavirus has played out in this region and specifically in the city, there doesn't on the face of it appear to be any form of correlation between the Bath half running and any form of spike, which as the weeks and months go by, I suspect will be, well, if not gratifying, at least it gives context for those who had such strong opinions at that time.
That's my understanding, yeah.
I want to move on to 21. You mentioned it was cancelled in 18. You've had the problems, but got it away in 20. Any reason to doubt your plans for 2021? Anything you're thinking of doing differently? And that's in March of 2021.
Well, I think like a previous speakers, it's very difficult, to be honest, to predict where we're going to be. In terms of social distancing alone, the current sort of established protocol in the UK is a 2-metre distance. That impacts significantly on our events. Your speaker talking about theatre, talking about social proximity, that is actually one of the key factors of our event. Also, people actually like the feeling of being together in a crowd. They like that feeling both as spectators and as participants, and it creates that human interaction in the midst of this performance. Now, 2 meters would be very difficult, but the people are now talking about 1.5 or 1 meter. I've even heard 10 meters mentioned for running events and 20 meters for cycling events. So it's very difficult for us at the moment. We don't know whether any of the autumn events are going to go ahead. No one is, some of them have been cancelled recently and postponed. Some of the ones from spring have been put back into the autumn. Will they go ahead? We don't know. So there is a consultation going on at the moment. Discussions are being held with government at national level to decide what kind of rules and regulations are appropriate for this type of event. Potentially, if we work with 2 meters, we'd be looking at trying to find a single lap course. We'd be looking at extended road closures. So we may have road closures that would go through the entire day. We'd be looking at a time trial rather than a race, people going off in waves of smaller numbers, and significantly reduced capacity. We might be down to as little as sort of 25–30% capacity. That's the kind of modelling that we're looking at the moment. But it's very difficult because we really just don't know where this is, where the science is going to lead us to when the epidemiology is finally starts to emerge. And it's very frustrating for everybody. There's so much uncertainty around this. It's a new virus. It's completely unprecedented. We really don't have the data behind to support a lot of these decisions.
Who would have thought that it's like an example of the sort of chaos theory that epidemiological issues would affect the running of an event in Bath, and literally the running when it comes to the Bath half. One last question in brief, Andrew, and I'll bring it out to the others. Would you prefer to have a smaller, constrained, as you've talked about potentially, event in, say, March, or hold out for a larger one if you're able to schedule it in September of next year?
Well, part of our operational planning now is that we have to plan around all contingencies. So, when we consult, we haven't launched entries yet for next year, and we're still waiting for a little bit of certainty before we can actually do that. But in our planning, we will allow for postponing into the autumn, and potentially postponing for later in the spring as well, so we can hop around that. It really is too difficult to say. I think, from the city's point of view, the public health benefits of an event like ours are massive. So that the UK and all the developing nations are facing an epidemic of diseases related, lifestyle diseases, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, dementia, depression, all related to lack of physical exercise. And it's events like ours that cost the NHS and the government absolutely nothing, that actually inspire people to participate across all age groups and fitness levels. I must say, I've been very heartened in the lockdown period, seeing the number of people engaging with running and walking and cycling that are new to or returning to those sports. And it'd be great if we could actually harness that into people being fitter, and their physical well-being and their mental well-being coming forward at this event. And for that, we need events like ours. And the other thing I'd say is that the charities need us. We've delivered £25 million for charity since 2000. It's about £2 million a year. And without that, charities like Dorothy House will really suffer. We are one of their biggest fundraisers of the year. Sort of just under £50,000 they would have raised through our event this year, £750,000 since 2000. So our local charities need that kind of money. They need it.
Right. Andrew, you've made an extremely powerful point, both from health and from charities. And for the Bath Half, for the Theatre Royal Bath, for Dorothy House and the Bath Festivals, we are all backing you, we all support you. And in Bath Life's case, we will do all we can to help promote where we can, when we know what you're doing. Because for the vitality of the city, as well as the specific issues you've raised, it is essential that our events in the city come roaring back. Let me bring roaring back, if not that, our other panelists. We just come to the open session. I want to pick up, there's an observation from David. I'm afraid I don't know his last name. One observation which I think seems very fair about the theatre, those filmed events only work so well because they were filmed with a live audience, which sort of goes broadly to your point, Nicky. But he also makes a more general point which applies across the piece. which is that if Ian and others don't think that live events will be back before November, and that even may be very optimistic, many of the event support businesses, sound, lighting, crewing, etc., won't still be around, especially if some of those events move online for the time being. So what's going to happen next summer if you haven't got your support network to the extent you all require it, of freelancers and so on? How will that play out? Who would like to take that?
Well, can I just say, on our race day, quite a few of our contractors that we were working with came up to me and they were showing me their mobile phones as the cancellations of all their spring and summer bookings, right through some of them into the autumn, were literally just pinging up on their phones. So I have a great concern that a lot of the contractors that we've worked with for many years, really well established and very reputable contractors delivering fine quality, will not be here when we reopen sometime later in the autumn or into the spring.
Ian, can I ask you to go on this? How big an issue is this for you as an enterprise and events more generally?
It could be significant, but I don't think it's unique in the arts and the events world to others. You know, we heard about Rolls-Royce, and we heard more in the media about all the supply chain feeding into, you know, Rolls-Royce requirements in parts, etc. So it is a huge challenge. I wish I could give David a succinct answer. I mean, looking at it the other way around, when we first started talking about finale weekend and deposits that we had already paid to management companies and everything, there was a tremendous, they knew that festivals needed to be there next year. So there was very much more collaboration and understanding in trying to, you know, the whole concept of being here together and working together to work it through. So on a smaller scale, I think that becomes more feasible solution. But I genuinely don't believe it's unique to the arts organisation. It's the whole economy that's going to suffer in the way that David highlights, you know, all the way down the supply chain as the end of that supply chain goes under, if it goes under. So it's a big question.
Thank you. I want to come to Nicky on a specific question from Luke John Emmett at Theatre Bath. He says audience social distancing is one thing, and that's incredibly complicated. What about performers and backstage staff? How might that work? How can you work backstage, socially distanced in productions?
Well, I don't know, and that's the key thing. I mean, right from the very beginning, I mean, some things can be done online. Casting can be done online. A lot of casting happens online already. If you've got an artist who's overseas and can't get into an audition, so a lot of casting can be done online. Rehearsing, I have no idea. It's all about social proximity. I mean, stating the obvious, how can you produce Romeo and Juliet if Romeo and Juliet can't get together? It's, you know,
the story now.
Oh, sorry. I mean, it's very hard. And then you look at costume fittings, wig fittings. Even if you go to a very small scale production, you have stage management that are handing over props in the wings to actors as they're coming on and off stage. A lot of theatres are old buildings. They're cramped. There's narrow corridors backstage. And I think it's funny. I think there was something in the paper yesterday about the possibility of social distancing measures being much reduced for orchestras, to allow orchestras to play together. So whether or not they're going to look at something for theatre and live performance, I don't know. But then again, it's also going to be about the confidence of particularly perhaps some of the older actors coming back. You know, are they going to be happy to not social distance with other performers? And then you've got the whole thing, particularly with touring. It's all very well having them in one venue for a week, and then what happens at the end of that week? They all get on public transport and traipse around the country to all the other venues. So I have no idea. It's a massive thing, and that's the detail that we're waiting to come out.
I admire your candour. You're very straightforward in that. The truth is, many of us don't know very much about anything that's going to be happening. We've all got to attempt to navigate our course as best we can. I want to come on to the broader cultural point, which applies to all forms of events, which we've sort of touched on. Timing and logistics will be determined by government primarily. But what about culturally, about all of us sitting in the dark with strangers, or the proximity at events, the the serendipity of all forms of events is born of occasional encounters. Will that inhibit what you're able to do going forwards because people will fear? Who'd take it?
Yeah, I think it will be gradual, and I do absolutely believe, even when the guidelines are that it is safe to come back to whatever experience they're talking about, it will be the individual's attitude to risk that will be dependent on how quickly that happens. And I think for a long time, we're going to have alternatives to what we've known historically. And yeah, everybody has a different attitude to risk, and the festivals, a large part of our events are for the older profile, and I think they will be the slowest to come back, even when the guidelines say they can come back. So it's going to be with us for some time.
And if you take a macro position, I'm afraid I don't know the stats, but intuitively it seems to be the case that culture in the broadest sense in Bath, rightly or wrongly, skews older, whether it's literature or whether it's the main house, at least of the theatre. Does that also provide an additional problem in Bath? Your clientele on the whole is older, therefore more risk averse potentially, because they know they're more at risk.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, and Nicky, is that a consideration for LB?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I was talking about this with Danny, the theatre director, the other day, and I think it's really hard. I don't think it is. I don't think you can say that perhaps it's just the older generation or our older patrons are going to be more concerned, because actually I think if you talk to younger people, some younger people are more concerned, and some older people are, you know, perhaps less risk averse. I just think it's going to be really unusual. I think if there's anything, a positive thought that I sort of hang on to is that by being one of the later sectors to reopen, you hope that some public confidence will have come back, as people will start getting used to going into the shops again or using public transport. And so perhaps that is that gentle, I think by being perhaps towards the end, perhaps we will benefit a little bit from increased confidence, albeit marginal. We're certainly hoping so.
Just to say, thank you, just to say, the David who asked the question earlier was David Rose of Navigator Systems, and he has indefatigably has another one, which is seated events are surely much easier than events which are naturally hot and sweaty, like standing gigs, nightclubs, and so on. So it's one of the point I think is wherever we are in the chain, there are some cases which are even more troubled. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Certainly with us talking about the N2 kind of runs where there's then a celebratory element that, yeah, it is like that. Yeah, that becomes a much harder thing to police. But I think coming back to that point before, one of the things we have to be really cautious of in this is not ending up with a group of excluded people who can no longer benefit from the culture, can no longer be part of these experiences, because though, you know, many of Dorothy House's clients that we support are some of the most vulnerable people in our community, and we don't want those people to end up with a lower quality of life because the shielding can't work around them. And it may not be the same experience, but I think taking in this element of hybridized events for that is therefore so important. We've run a virtual open day that had 100 people, not inside our building, but actually some of those people may have been people who couldn't have physically traveled into the building, even in normal times, but were able to engage. And that's something we really want to stick with and take forward to whatever comes next.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in a question from Les Redwood, a storied man who's worked in a number of different Bath organisations, most recently, or currently rather, Citizen Advice. He asks this: can I ask the panellists what one line, and please one line, would you like to give to our councillors and council officers as to why events are so vitally important in our World Heritage City? A one-liner for the council.
To me, they're the living culture that we've got rather than the heritage.
They connect the community and bring such positive economic impact.
Nicky, Andrew, any
Yes,
additional?
I mean, I think community events bring the community together, and they allow the community to celebrate and enjoy, and it breaks down boundaries between people. It's more than one line, sorry.
That's okay. Nicky, I mean, Cathedral Bath hasn't previously had any funding really materially from Baines, but do you have advice for them?
No, I just think as the other three have all said, actually, it's supporting the community, whether that's events, arts, local businesses. That's the key thing. You've got to support the business community, the local community. That's what makes Bath.
It's a very good point, and we've been keen to encourage this with Bath Life, that the lockdown makes everything local. We are that much more aware of the importance of local, whether it's the topography of our immediate locales, the ecosystem of the independent businesses in Bath. We are all that much more aware of it. I want to come to one last question to you each, sort of asking for a friend, really. Could you give advice for anyone in events right now?
For me, it's about diversifying. So we've been working with a company called Event Amplify, who are always in the space of supporting virtual events, but I know in the past they've struggled. Right now, they're doing really well. Suited and Booted film production we work with, and they were so flexible, they brought someone off furlough for a week to do a project with us, and we hugely appreciated that flexibility, and that certainly, I think, will stand everyone in good stead for the future.
Yeah, I would say we're very much creative people. Let's think out of the box. Let's innovate and let's create opportunities from this, because I think they're there for the taking, and that's the exciting part of this. Really, you know, we are a creative industry, and we are innovators and entrepreneurial, and I think we can think out of the box, and it's more important than ever.
Creativity always matters, but it matters more now than ever. Andrew,
yeah.
Some further advice, thoughts, and so on.
Well, we've done a virtual event for 1,200 people, which was very well received. I would agree with your previous speakers. I think it's a time to think outside the box. Try not to you can't follow the script that you followed for previous years. You really need to work it's a completely new world for all of us, but the same basic rules will apply, and I think you don't throw it all out with the bathwater. And I think, you know, we do have to have some hope that a degree of normal life will return. It's just that it may be shifted 2 degrees to the left or to the right than it was previously.
So Nicky, thank you. Nicky, not following the script sounds anathema to a theatre organisation, but other than that and the points raised, what might you advise anyone working in events right now?
No, I think that's it. And I think, as Ian just said, I mean, that's it. We're a creative industry. We are innovative. We can think outside the box. We have to think outside the box. That's what our industry is all about. It's about being flexible. But I think as well, it is also about planning as much as you can plan, given the uncertainty surrounding everything. And in actual fact, if you can still plan for a multitude of scenarios, at least then hopefully we'll all be ready to hit the ground reasonably running whenever we are given the green light to go ahead, albeit a hybrid of what we might normally do. And yeah, just stay positive, because we will all come through this, you know, the other side.
So there you are, you two exchange metaphors. Andrew talks about not following the script. You talk about hitting the ground running. That could have been scripted, who knew? Last point, very briefly, because you're right at the end, please. We've been very keen, part of this whole point of stressing the positives, to highlight the good that people do. It's been really touching to see how the people and businesses of Bath are creating clever ways to support and help where they can. We've been sharing those on social media and our weekly Bath Life email using the hashtag Bath Together. We encourage everyone to do that. Could I ask each of the panellists succinctly to share one lovely thing that people are doing, starting with Nicky, perhaps?
The one thing I've really noticed is the fact that we've all seemed to have more time and less pressure on our time. And I just think it's been delightful to see people out and about, enjoying our, well, particularly since lockdown's been eased, enjoying our local area, enjoying the countryside, enjoying spending time with our families, which, let's face it, a lot of the times we're ships that pass in the night by the time, you know, we fit in everything else. And that's been delightful. And I really hope that's just a feeling that we hang on to when we come through this, the other side.
Let's hope it endures. Andrew.
Because I've certainly, in the weather, we've been blessed with some gorgeous weather, and I've been very inspired by seeing people out and about in family groups, walking, cycling, running, in numbers that I haven't previously seen, and hopefully doing it for the right reasons, because they need to, they need to exercise and they feel better doing it, rather than to meet a schedule or to some deadlines in front of them. And particularly we're blessed with the environment we've got around us in Bath, some gorgeous landscapes and countryside. And let's hope that stays, that feeling of well-being and being out in the environment, the natural environment, will stay with us.
Thank you. Ian?
It seems odd to say it in the world of social distancing, but I think communication, collaboration, communication, and particularly on the 8 o'clock on a Thursday, walking through Larkhall, which is where I live in Bath, and seeing everybody out on the street socially distancing and actually getting to know their neighbours and communicating in a different way to what they have done before. And that friendship is just phenomenal. And I just hope that lasts moving forward, that greater community awareness and conversation and communication.
Thank you. James, last point.
Yeah, well, Dorothy House have been hugely humbled by the way our community have stepped up to support us, but I'd particularly like to highlight Bath City Farm, a charity running a visitor attraction that's closed that have delivered over 1,000 meals home cooked to the community at this time. That's just an amazing achievement by them.
Very, very good of you to give a shout out. Many Bath charities are doing extraordinary things currently, supported by our community and our businesses, which is humbling and vital at the same time. I'd like us to end and thank our panellists. Thank you to Ian, to Nicky, to James, and to Andrew. Please look out for the next Bath Life Business Club and Business Surgery. Join us for another wine tasting event if you fancy. We'll raise money for the Bull, which itself raises money for local charities. Thanks to all of you for contributing today and watching this, indeed watching subsequently on YouTube. I'm sorry I've not been able to take all of your questions. We've had a number this time. Thanks to our sponsors of the real Bath Life Business Club, Motors Druid. Good luck to all of you navigating these unimagined times, and let's hold to the belief which a number of you have expressed today, that enduring good can come from this. I do also just want to quote what Jane said earlier, live well and cherish every moment. It's forcing us to think very deeply about our life values. This is a tough time, but this too shall pass. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been the virtual Bath Life Business Club. Thank you. Bath together.